The latest grading data has dropped and it's looking even more dire for sports cards in particular. The decline continues to happen, and that is quite surprising considering we're in the lead up to the National and you'd expect these things to maybe be booming a little bit more than what they have been. So I'm going to talk about this despite touching on it only 3 or 4 weeks ago, because this decline continues to happen. I'm going to reference the gem rate data, and I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below, because like I said, these numbers don't paint a very good picture for the sustainability of the hobby as we know it now. Some of you guys will push back on that, but as always, I will share my thoughts and we can chat down below. Now, GemRate have posted their data in the last 3 to 4 days for June, and like I said, it does not paint a very good picture for sports cars. Now, this is the total grading for June 2025, and you can see here that CGC continued to have done really, really well. SGC, pretty much flat, not real growth at all. Beckett, a little bit of growth because they did sweet F4 last year. And then obviously PSA having a decline month on month, but year on year are doing pretty well. And you might see this at face value and say, hey, things are going fantastically well, Daniel. What the heck are you talking about? Like we touched on in the last video, the thing that is of interest, and I'm clicking on the wrong button, I do apologize. The thing that is of interest is this tab over here, where it's specifically looking at sports and miscellaneous, because what we've identified and what many have talked about before is that TCG is booming, in particular Pokemon. You can see here the numbers for PSA are insane, including CGC, which is known for their Pokemon grading, their TCG grading. These numbers are crazy growth year on year. They've basically exploded. And you've sort of seen that when it comes to social media, all these influencers talking about Pokemon, all of a sudden, all these people that know nothing about TCG, all of a sudden making making YouTube channels and the like. So it makes sense to sort of see those numbers going what they have. Where the sort of concern has come is on sports cards, where you've seen a decline, and it's been like this for, I think, 7 or so months now, where literally month on month, there's less and less cards being sent in for grading, and year on year, you can see there's a pretty big dip. Now, the reason why I think this is a bit, strange for June is because obviously the Nationals at the end of July. I think it's on July 30th until the 5th or 6th of August. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's not too far away. So you would have assumed that in the run up to this show, you would have seen people, going ahead and getting things graded. And people have challenged in the past and said, well, Daniel, PSA have not done a whole lot of sports card specials in the last 6 to 12 months or whatever it is. So that's why we're seeing a decline, because the specials haven't been there. People haven't sent in bulk things, etc., etc. But like I touched on, that's not a good thing in my opinion. That's not something to sort of say, hey, you shouldn't be concerned about these numbers for that reason. That should make you more concerned that you've got a consumer base, a customer base as a business in this space, as a third-party grader, that is relying on that to get customers through the door. Because if your people are that fickle to sort of participate with you and be a customer of yours, what does that tell you about, the wider lens on the hobby? What does that tell you about, people's desire to actually be participating in this industry long-term? Because if you've got people so focused on the money that they're not going to capitalize, on specials because they're not there and they're going to walk away, or they're not going to bother spending their money anymore, there's a lot of other dominoes and levers that could be pulled that could make that situation even worse, meaning all those people that are going to be there bringing liquidity to this industry are not going to want to be there anymore. Right? If they're that easy to turn away, like PSA year on year have lost 28% of their customers for sports cards is essentially what this screen is showing you. And it's not a small amount. And if the consumer base is that fickle to be that easily turned away, that's a lot of revenue loss for PSA. And obviously you might sit back and say, well, it's also because PSA have increased prices, they've had the tariff issues, they've increased turnaround times as a result, they've got a backlog again, so that is turning customers away. But that's not a definitive way to say that this is not a problem, right? I think there's a problem on this industry's hands, and maybe they're not truly thinking about the long-term ramifications of this. And some of you might also say, well, again, these sports card collectors have just turned to Pokemon to make the money again. If you're talking about a consumer base that's going to shift that quickly to the new fad, what does that mean for the long-term sustainability of product in this space? If you're somebody that's going ahead and spending, big money on cards, and maybe not the high-end cards that people actually want and would want to keep long-term, i.e. the, rookie cards and the on-card autos and the match-won stuff and the stuff tied to key games. I'm talking about all these cards that are on the periphery that all of a sudden have blown up because everything else has. If you've invested big in those and you've got a consumer base that's so quickly to turn around and move on to the next important thing, like, is somebody actually going to want to buy that thing off you long term? Like, that makes me concerned. So when I'm seeing these trends, it's like, okay, sure, maybe people just don't want to grade anymore. But I think about what, the dominoes are going to be off the back of that. People talk again about, PSA 9s now being worth the same as a Raw. That's also a big concern. You know, these things that are sort of shifting people's focus away from, you know, using these services are potentially going to flow into people not wanting to spend on cards anymore, or not wanting to buy certain cards. And you've got people that have then, you know, spent so much buying these cards and have, you know, huge inventory on these things. And it's like the money's going to stop eventually. So then what's the flow and effect from that? You have these cards, now you need to sell them fast. You're going to make a loss potentially. What does that mean for how you go ahead and spend and participate in this hobby? And all these businesses that are relying on all this liquidity. And it goes back to videos I've talked about a heck of a lot on this channel. I call it artificial liquidity. I talk about all the artificial liquidity that exists off the back of breaking and off the back of repacks. That is not real money being spent, because the cash is actually not being realized with the cards that you're actually getting off the back of that. You know, I've talked about this recently on a live. I'm rambling now, but the thought process is of that. You know, you've got repacks and breaking pushing prices of cards up so high. You've had the bubble push prices of cards up so high that they're at a point now where, is a collector actually going to feel comfortable paying that amount of money that this card now has to sell for, given it's been pushed all this height? Are you going to have a collector willing to pay for that? Is that price going to be realized? And obviously, I'm rambling now, but that's the concern I see when I see these grading numbers decline, when I see people willing to spend less money and the like. So I'm probably talking in circles right now, but that's the stuff that I think about when I see numbers like this. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it. You guys can share your thoughts down below, but I just thought we'd talk about it again because it's yet another month where we've seen a decline in the sports card space. You'll see, you know, May for sports cards was also down 30% year on year. It grew that month. So maybe they had a special last month and that's why people got a bit excited. But you can sort of see here, every month, sports cards continues to be a decline and they're losing 20% year on year consistently is essentially what this is saying, which is a problem, right, for them. And I'm curious to sort of see how they're going to claw back that revenue and what their thoughts are long term. But that's not something that we can ignore or put down purely to lack of specials, lack of interest. People have moved to Pokemon. If those are all the reasons you're using to justify that this is happening, that should make you a little bit concerned, especially if you're in this space beyond just collecting. You know, I'm a collector. Yes, I have a YouTube channel, but this is just done to educate. This is just done to inform and have a bit of fun. I'm out here collecting. So for me, I don't really give a shit because I'm going to be here collecting like I have for the last 35 years of my life. I'm going to be here regardless. The people here that are trying to make a living off the back of this industry should see this sort of stuff and be, you know, a bit more forward thinking and say, hey, how can we try and retain people? How can we make this hobby more sustainable? Because this just tells me there's a lot of, you know, FOMO, fickleness, and sort of people just being sheep. So I rambled a shit ton in this video. I do apologize. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.